My younger brother beat my son in the middle of the night. He called me, crying, "Mom, I'm at the hospital. Uncle hit me, but he told the police I attacked him. They believed him." When I arrived, the officer's face went pale. He stammered, "I'm sorry, I didn't know." My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel as I flew down the empty streets of Greenwich at 2:43 in the morning. The call from my son Ethan had come through 17 minutes ago, and every second felt like a lifetime. My younger brother, Julian, had always been trouble, but this? Putting his hands on my 18-year-old boy? I'd kill him myself if the cops didn't lock him up first. The emergency room entrance at Greenwich Hospital was lit up like a stage, and I abandoned my Mercedes right in the ambulance bay, not caring about the parking or the rules or anything except getting to my son. Inside, the fluorescent lights made everything look cold and clinical, and that's when I saw him. Officer Reynolds, the same cop who'd been at our family's charity gala just last month, the one who'd shaken Julian's hand and laughed at his jokes. Now he was standing near the nurse's station with his partner, and when he saw me walking toward them, his whole face changed. The color literally drained from his cheeks, and he took a step back like I'd slapped him. "Mrs. Hartwell," he said, and his voice cracked on my name. "I'm sorry, I didn't know." Didn't know what? That my brother was a liar? That my son was the victim here? I pushed past him without a word because I could see Ethan through the window of exam room 3, sitting on that paper-covered table with an ice pack pressed to his face, and nothing else mattered except getting to him. When I pulled back the curtain, the sight of my boy made my heart stop. His left eye was swollen shut, already turning that deep purple-black color that meant serious damage. Blood had dried under his nose and on his split lip, and when he looked up at me with his good eye, I saw something that scared me more than the injuries. I saw defeat. My son, who'd gotten to Yale on a full academic scholarship, who'd never backed down from a challenge in his life, looked broken. "Mom," he whispered, and his voice was so small, so unlike the confident young man who'd left for Julian's house in Riverside just 8 hours ago. He said I tried to steal from him. He told the cops I came at him first, and they believed him. They actually believed him. I wrapped my arms around him carefully, trying not to hurt him more, and felt him shake against me. Julian's house, my family's estate really, the one our father had left to be split between us, was where Ethan had been staying for the weekend. Julian had invited him, said they should spend some quality uncle-nephew time together, maybe look at some investment opportunities since Ethan was about to start his business degree. I'd thought it was sweet, thought maybe my little brother was finally growing up at 32, finally becoming the man our parents had hoped he'd be. Shows how wrong a mother can be. The nurse, a kind-faced woman named Sandra, according to her badge, came in and gave me a look that said she'd seen this before, family violence dressed up as something else. "The doctor will be back in a few minutes," she said gently. "We've documented everything, taken photos. Your son has a fractured orbital bone, Mrs. Hartwell. That's the bone around the eye socket. He's going to need to see a specialist." A fractured bone. My brother hit my son hard enough to break his face. I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest, something that felt like rage, but clearer, more focused. "Where is he?" I asked Ethan. "Where's Julian now?" Ethan pulled back and wiped his good eye with the back of his hand. "They let him go home. Can you believe that? Officer Reynolds said since Uncle Julian owns the property and I was a guest there, and since Uncle Julian had some scratches on his arms, it looked like mutual combat. They gave me a warning, Mom, a warning, like I did something wrong." That's when Officer Reynolds appeared in the doorway looking like he wanted to be anywhere else on Earth. "Mrs. Hartwell, if we could talk privately." "You let my brother go," I said, and my voice came out ice cold, the voice I used in boardroom negotiations when someone tried to screw over my commercial real estate firm. "You let the man who did this to my son walk out of here." Reynolds shifted his weight, glanced at his partner who was hovering behind him. "Ma'am, we responded to a call from your brother's residence. When we arrived, your brother stated that your son had become aggressive, that there'd been an argument about money and that he'd defended himself. Your brother had visible scratches and—" "Did you see my son's face?" I interrupted, keeping my voice level even though I wanted to scream. "Does this look like self-defense to you?" The partner, a younger officer named Chen, according to his nameplate, cleared his throat. "Mrs. Hartwell, we understand you're upset, but we have to follow protocol. Your brother's story was consistent, and there were signs of a struggle. We advised both parties, and—" "You advised my 18-year-old son, who has a broken face, the same way you advised my 32-year-old brother, who has some scratches?" I stepped closer to Reynolds, close enough that he had to meet my eyes. "Do you know who I am, Officer Reynolds?" He swallowed hard. "Yes, ma'am, you're Christine Hartwell. You own Hartwell Properties, you're on the board of—" "I'm the woman who writes the checks that fund half the police department's community programs," I said quietly. "I'm the woman who personally donated $200,000 to the new precinct building. I'm the woman whose family name is on the children's wing of this hospital. And you're telling me you gave my beaten son a warning?" I saw him start to understand what he'd walked into, saw the calculation happening behind his eyes. "Mrs. Hartwell, I didn't realize. I mean, your brother said his last name was Hartwell too, but I didn't make the connection." "Because you didn't want to," I finished. "You saw a wealthy man in an expensive house in Riverside, and you saw a teenager, and you made assumptions. Now get out of my sight before I have your badge." They left, and Ethan let out a long breath. "Ethan, you can't just threaten cops like that." "Watch me," I said, but my mind was already racing ahead, trying to piece together what had really happened. "Ethan, tell me everything. Start from the beginning." He shifted on the exam table, wincing. "Uncle Julian invited me over yesterday afternoon, said he wanted to talk about some business stuff, maybe mentor me a little before I start at Yale in the fall. We had dinner, just the two of us. His girlfriend Veronica wasn't there. He said she was visiting her sister in Boston. We talked about real estate, about investment strategies, normal stuff. It was actually pretty cool. Then, around midnight, I went to bed in the guest room." He paused, touching his swollen eye gently. "I woke up around 2 because I heard voices downstairs, loud voices. I thought maybe Veronica had come back and they were fighting, so I went down to check, make sure everything was okay. But when I got to the bottom of the stairs, I saw Uncle Julian in his office with someone else, a man I didn't recognize. This was new information. What man? Tall guy, maybe 45, 50, wearing a suit at 2 in the morning, which was weird. They were arguing about money. The guy was saying something about Julian owing him, about payments being late, about interest piling up. Julian saw me standing there, and his whole face changed. He told me to go back upstairs, but the other guy started laughing and said something like, "This is the nephew? The one going to Yale? Maybe he should know what kind of man his uncle really is." Ethan's voice got quieter. "That's when Uncle Julian lost it. He started yelling at me to get out, to mind my own business. The other guy left through the side door, and Uncle Julian came at me. I thought he was just going to push me toward the stairs, but he punched me, full force, right in the face. I went down, and he kept hitting me. I tried to cover up, tried to push him away, and I guess that's when I scratched his arms. But Mom, I swear I didn't attack him. He attacked me." I believed him. Of course I believed him. But this story about the mysterious man, about Julian owing money, that opened up questions I'd been avoiding for months. My brother had been acting strange lately, more secretive, more defensive when I asked about the family business. Our father had left us equal shares in several properties, including the Riverside estate and a portfolio of commercial buildings in downtown Greenwich. Julian was supposed to be managing his half, but I'd heard rumors, whispers at country club lunches and charity dinners, that he was in over his head, that he'd made bad investments, that he was borrowing from the wrong people. The doctor came back, a steady-handed surgeon named Dr. Patel, who explained that Ethan would need surgery to repair the orbital fracture, that we were looking at weeks of recovery, that there could be permanent damage to his vision if we didn't act fast. I signed the consent forms and called my lawyer while they prepped my son for emergency surgery. Richard Connolly had been my attorney for 15 years, handling everything from corporate acquisitions to my divorce from Ethan's father, and he answered on the second ring, despite the early hour. "Christine, what's wrong?" "I need you to do something for me," I said, pacing the hospital hallway while nurses wheeled Ethan toward the OR. "I need you to pull every financial record we have on Julian. Every property deed, every business transaction, every bank account that's connected to the family trust. I need to know what he's been doing with his money." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "This is about what happened to Ethan, isn't it? I got a call from someone at the hospital. I'm already on my way." "Richard, I think my brother is in serious trouble, the kind that involves loan sharks and desperate decisions. And I think that's why he hurt my son, because Ethan saw something he wasn't supposed to see." "Don't do anything rash," Richard warned. "Let me handle this legally. Don't confront Julian until we know what we're dealing with." But I was already pulling up Julian's number on my phone. He answered on the fourth ring, sounding groggy and irritated. "Christine, it's 3 a.m. What do you want?" "You put my son in the hospital," I said, keeping my voice steady. "You broke his face and then lied to the police about it." Silence. Then, in a harder voice, "Ethan attacked me. He came into my office uninvited, started making accusations." "Stop lying," I interrupted. "Who was the man in your office tonight, the one Ethan saw you arguing with about money?" Another pause. Longer this time. When Julian spoke again, all the grogginess was gone. "I don't know what he told you, but he's confused. There was no one else here. He probably hit his head and imagined." "Julian, I'm giving you one chance to tell me the truth. What have you done? How much trouble are you in?" "You need to back off, Christine," my brother said, and there was something in his voice I'd never heard before. Something cold and threatening. "This doesn't concern you. Stay out of my business and keep your son away from my house." He hung up. I stood there in the fluorescent-lit hallway holding my phone, feeling the pieces of something enormous starting to come together in my mind. Julian wasn't just in trouble. He was in the kind of trouble that made men desperate, made them violent, made them turn on their own family. And if I didn't figure out what was really going on, my son wouldn't be the last person to get hurt. Richard arrived 20 minutes later with his briefcase and his game face on. We sat in the surgical waiting room and he pulled out his tablet, showing me what he'd already started to uncover. "Your brother has been liquidating assets," Richard said, scrolling through documents. "In the last 6 months, he's sold off 3 of the properties he inherited, all at below market value. The money went into an offshore account that I'm still trying to trace." 3 properties? I felt my stomach drop. Those buildings were worth millions. Where did the money go? That's what we need to find out. But Christine, there's something else. 2 weeks ago, Julian took out a mortgage on the Riverside estate, a big one. He borrowed $4 million against the house. I stared at him. "He can't do that. That property is held in a trust. He'd need my signature." "He forged it," Richard said grimly. "I've already seen the documents. Your signature is on the mortgage application, but you and I both know you never signed it. That's fraud, Christine. That's a felony." The room started to spin. My brother hadn't just hit my son, he'd been stealing from the family trust, forging my signature, mortgaging properties that weren't fully his to mortgage. What else? I asked, because I could see in Richard's eyes that he hadn't told me everything. He hesitated, then swiped to another screen. There's a life insurance policy. Your father set it up years ago, a $10 million policy that pays out to the surviving child if anything happens to either of you. If you died, Julian gets everything. If he died, you get everything. The words hung in the air between us. Richard, are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying your brother is in debt to dangerous people, he's desperate for money, and there's a $10 million policy with your name on it. I'm saying you need to be very careful, Christine. Men have killed for less. I thought about Ethan, lying in surgery because he'd witnessed something he shouldn't have. I thought about Julian's voice on the phone, cold and threatening. I thought about the mysterious man in the suit talking about payments and interest. He's planning something, I said slowly. That's why he invited Ethan over. That's why he's been so friendly lately, trying to get close to us. He's not just desperate, he's dangerous. Richard closed his tablet. We need to go to the police with this. Real police, not some beat cop who can be charmed by a nice house. We need to talk to someone who can investigate financial crimes, someone who can protect you and Ethan. But I was thinking about Officer Reynolds's face when he realized who I was. I was thinking about how the system had already failed my son once tonight. I was thinking about how my brother had spent his whole life getting away with things, charming his way out of consequences, using our family name as a shield. No, I said, we're not going to the police. Not yet. Richard looked sharply at me. Christine, my brother thinks he's smarter than everyone else. He thinks he can manipulate the situation, control the narrative, make himself the victim. He's been doing it his whole life, and it's always worked. But not this time. What are you planning? I stood up, feeling that cold, clear focus settle over me again. I'm going to do what I should have done years ago. I'm going to stop protecting him. I'm going to find out exactly what he's done, who he owes money to, and what he's planning. And then I'm going to take everything from him the same way he tried to take everything from us. Richard shook his head. This is dangerous. If Julian really is involved with loan sharks, with criminals, then I'll deal with them too, I said. He touched my son, Richard. He broke my boy's face and lied about it. He forged my signature and stole from our family. And if you're right, if he's planning something worse... I stopped, feeling tears threaten for the first time that night. I have to protect Ethan. I have to stop Julian before he hurts anyone else. And I'm not going to do it by asking nicely or hoping the system works. I'm going to do it by being smarter than him. The surgery took 4 hours. When Dr. Patel finally came out, she told me it had gone well, that Ethan would recover, that the damage wasn't as extensive as they'd feared. I sat with my son in recovery, watching him sleep off the anesthesia, and I made promises that I would fix this, that I would make Julian pay, that I would uncover every lie and every secret until the truth came out. Around 8 in the morning, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Stop asking questions about your brother, Mrs. Hartwell. Some things are better left alone. For your son's sake. I stared at the message, feeling ice run through my veins. Someone was watching me. Someone knew I was digging into Julian's finances. Someone wanted me scared, but they'd threatened the wrong woman. I texted back, "Tell whoever sent you that I'm just getting started." Then I turned off my phone and called in every favor I was owed. I called Mitchell Tang, a forensic accountant who'd helped me expose fraud in a business deal 5 years ago. I called Patricia Moreno, a private investigator who specialized in financial crimes. I called every contact I had in the banking industry, every lawyer friend, every person who owed me something. By noon, I had a team assembled. We were going to tear apart Julian's life, piece by piece, until we found out what he was hiding. And when I found out who had threatened my son, who had enabled my brother's violence, who had been profiting from his crimes, I was going to burn it all down. The nurse came in to check on Ethan, and I stepped out into the hallway to take a call from Patricia. "Christine, I did some preliminary digging," she said, her voice tight with urgency. "Your brother's in deeper than you thought. The man Ethan saw last night, I think I know who he is. His name is Vincent Russo. He's connected to a lending operation that works out of New York, the kind that doesn't take no for an answer. If Julian borrowed from them—" "How much?" I interrupted. "How much does he owe?" "Based on what I'm seeing, at least 8 million, maybe more. And Christine, these people don't mess around. If Julian can't pay—" "He's using the life insurance policy as collateral," I said, the pieces falling into place. "He's promised them they'll get their money when I die. That's why he forged my signature on the mortgage. He's been setting up his financial escape plan, and I'm the exit strategy." Patricia was quiet for a moment. "You need protection, real protection. I know people." "Get me everything you can on Vincent Russo and his organization," I said. "I want to know how they operate, who works for them, what leverage they have over Julian. I want to know everything." When I hung up, I looked through the window at my son, still sleeping, still healing from what my brother had done to him. Ethan didn't know it yet, but he'd stumbled into the middle of something much bigger than a family argument. He'd become a witness to my brother's desperation, and that made him a liability. That's why Julian had beaten him so badly, not just to shut him up, but to send a message, to show what happened to people who interfered. But Julian had made one critical mistake. He'd underestimated me. He'd thought I'd be like my mother, turning a blind eye to his problems, making excuses, protecting the family name above all else. He'd thought I'd be too scared or too proper to fight back. He didn't know that I'd built my business from nothing, that I'd survived a vicious divorce and a hostile corporate takeover, that I'd learned how to win wars without ever throwing a punch. My phone rang again. This time it was Richard, and his voice was shaking. "Christine, you need to sit down. I found something in the trust documents, something I don't think even Julian knows about yet." "What is it?" "Your father wrote in a clause, if either beneficiary is found guilty of a felony related to the trust assets, fraud, embezzlement, forgery, their entire share automatically transfers to the other beneficiary. Everything Julian owns, every property, every asset, it would all become yours." I felt my heart start to race. "So if we can prove he forged my signature—" "He loses everything," Richard confirmed. "The Riverside estate, his remaining properties, his share of the family business, all of it. He'd be left with nothing, and he'd be facing criminal charges. Christine, this is how we stop him. We don't need revenge, we just need proof." But I knew it wasn't that simple. Julian wasn't going to go down without a fight, and Vincent Russo wasn't going to lose $8 million just because we had some paperwork. "Richard, if Julian loses everything, he can't pay back his debts. What do you think happens then?" Silence on the other end as he realized what I was saying. "They'll come after him. These loan sharks, they'll—" "Exactly," I said. "So here's what's going to happen. We're going to get our proof, we're going to expose Julian's crimes, and we're going to make sure everyone knows exactly what he's done. But we're also going to give him one chance to make this right." "How?" "I'm still figuring that out," I admitted. "But whatever happens, Julian's going to wish he'd never laid a hand on my son." When Ethan woke up from surgery, the first thing he said was, "Mom, I think Uncle Julian was planning to kill you." I was sitting in the chair beside his hospital bed, running on coffee and adrenaline after 18 hours without sleep, and hearing those words spoken out loud made everything suddenly, terrifyingly real. "What makes you say that?" I asked, keeping my voice calm even though my heart was hammering. Ethan struggled to sit up, wincing at the pain from his injuries. "Before he hit me, when I was standing in the hallway watching him argue with that man, Vincent, I think that was his name, I heard Vincent say something about life insurance. He said, 'You better make sure that policy pays out soon, Julian, or we're going to have a problem.' And Uncle Julian said, 'It's handled. She trusts me. It'll look like an accident.'" The room went cold. My own brother, planning my murder. I wanted to throw up, wanted to scream, wanted to march over to his house and tear him apart with my bare hands. Instead, I took Ethan's hand and squeezed it gently. "Did Vincent say anything else?" He laughed, his voice hollow. He said, "Make it good, make it believable. We're not paying out $10 million for sloppy work." That's when Uncle Julian noticed me. That's when everything went wrong. I thought about the text I'd received earlier, the warning to stop asking questions. They hadn't just been trying to scare me, they'd been worried I'd figure out the plan before Julian could execute it. "Mom, what are we going to do?" Ethan asked, and I could hear the fear in his voice. "He's family. He's your brother. How do we stop him?" That was the question I'd been asking myself all night. How do you take down someone you've loved your whole life? How do you expose someone who shares your blood, your history, your last name? The answer came to me in pieces, like a puzzle finally revealing its picture. "We're going to give Julian exactly what he wants," I said slowly. "We're going to make him think he's won." Over the next 3 days, while Ethan recovered in the hospital, I put my plan into motion. It started with a phone call to Julian, my voice carefully controlled to sound tired and defeated. "We need to talk," I said when he answered, "about what happened with Ethan, about the family. Can you come by the hospital tomorrow?" There was suspicion in his voice. "Why, so you can have me arrested?" "No," I lied, "so we can figure this out like adults." Ethan told me what really happened, about you defending yourself, about him getting aggressive. I talked to him about his behavior lately, and I think we need to have a serious conversation about his future. I could practically hear Julian's mind working, calculating whether this was a trap. "What about your future?" he asked carefully. "What do you mean?" "I mean, are you going to press charges? Are you going to try to destroy me over this?" I let out a long sigh, playing the part of the exhausted sister who just wanted peace. "Julian, you're my brother. You're the only family I have left besides Ethan. I'm angry about what happened, but I don't want to lose you. Can we just talk, please?" He agreed to meet me at the hospital at 2 the following afternoon. As soon as I hung up, I called Patricia Moreno and Mitchell Tang into Ethan's hospital room where we'd set up our unofficial war room. "He's coming. Now we need to make sure everything is in place." Mitchell pulled up his laptop and showed me what he'd found in Julian's financial records. "Your brother has been running a Ponzi scheme for the last 2 years, he explained, his forensic accountant brain breaking down the numbers with clinical precision. "He's been using new investors' money to pay off old investors, promising returns he can't deliver. The properties he sold, that money went straight to Vincent Russo to keep him from breaking Julian's legs. The mortgage he took out on the Riverside estate, same thing. But he's running out of assets to liquidate, and Russo's getting impatient." "How many people has he scammed?" I asked. Mitchell scrolled through a list. "At least 40 investors, mostly people from your social circle, friends, business associates, people who trusted the Hartwell name. Total losses are somewhere around $12 million. I felt sick. My brother hadn't just betrayed me, he'd betrayed everyone who'd ever believed in him, everyone who'd trusted our family's reputation. "What about the life insurance policy?" Patricia spoke up, pulling out a folder full of documents. "I talked to some contacts in the insurance industry. If Julian's planning to kill you and make it look like an accident, he'll need to be smart about it. The policy has a 2-year contestability period that expired last year, which means the insurance company can't refuse to pay out unless they can prove fraud or murder. But here's the thing, Vincent Russo has done this before. She pulled out newspaper clippings, police reports, documentation of 3 other cases where Russo's loan targets had died in convenient accidents, leaving their beneficiaries free to collect insurance money and pay off their debts. 2 of them were ruled accidental deaths, Patricia continued. 1 was inconclusive. In each case, the debtor had taken out large life insurance policies on family members shortly before the deaths occurred, but nothing was ever proven. So Russo has a system, I said. He knows how to make murder look natural. Exactly, and your brother's desperate enough to go along with it. Ethan, who'd been listening from his hospital bed, spoke up quietly. Mom, this is insane. We need to go to the police. We need protection. We will, I assured him. But first, we need to make sure Julian and Russo can't wriggle out of this. We need them to confess, on record, to what they're planning. And I think I know how to make that happen. I explained my plan to the team, watching their faces go from skeptical to impressed as they realized what I was proposing. It was risky, borderline reckless, but it was the only way to guarantee that Julian would face real consequences for what he'd done. Richard Connolly arrived that evening with the final piece of the puzzle, documents proving Julian's forgery, his embezzlement from the family trust, and his fraudulent investment scheme. This is enough to put him away for 10 to 15 years, Richard said, spreading the papers across Ethan's bed. But if we add attempted murder to the charges, life in prison, no chance of parole. That night, I made a call to Vincent Russo himself. Patricia had given me his number, and when he answered, his voice was smooth and cultured, nothing like the thug I'd imagined. "Mrs. Hartwell," he said, like we were old friends, "I've been expecting your call. Then you know why I'm calling. I know that you've been asking a lot of questions about your brother's finances. I know you've hired investigators and accountants. I know you're smart enough to have figured out that Julian owes me a considerable amount of money." I took a breath, steadying myself. "I want to make a deal." There was interest in his voice now. "What kind of deal?" "Julian's planning to kill me to collect on a life insurance policy. You know it. I know it, and I'm sure you're involved in the planning. Here's what I'm offering. I'll make it easy for him. I'll put myself in a situation where he thinks he can succeed, but when he does, you'll be there to witness it, and I'll have enough evidence to put both of you away for the rest of your lives." Russo laughed, a genuine sound of amusement. "You're proposing that I watch your brother attempt to murder you so you can testify against us? Mrs. Hartwell, do you think I'm stupid?" "I think you're a businessman," I said. "And I think you're smart enough to know that Julian can't pay you back. He's broke. The only asset he has left is that life insurance policy. And if you help him kill me, you're an accessory to murder. That's a needle in your arm in this state. But if you help me instead, if you cooperate with the authorities and testify against Julian, you might be able to cut a deal. You might walk away with nothing worse than tax evasion or racketeering. You might even keep your business running." There was a long silence. Then, "What makes you think I wouldn't just kill you myself and take my chances?" "Because I've already documented everything," I said calmly. "I've given copies of all my evidence to 3 different lawyers with instructions to release it to the FBI, the State Attorney General, and the New York Times if anything happens to me. You kill me, you destroy yourself. But if you play this smart, you survive." Another pause. "You're bluffing." "Try me," I said, "or better yet, show up tomorrow at 2 p.m. at Greenwich Hospital, room 417. My brother's coming to see me, and I'm going to give him the opportunity to either confess or make a move. You can watch what happens and decide for yourself whether I'm someone you want to mess with." I hung up before he could respond, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. Patricia looked at me with something like awe. You just threatened a loan shark. You actually called him up and threatened him. I gave him an out, I corrected. Big difference. The next afternoon, I positioned everyone carefully. Mitchell was in the hospital room next door with recording equipment. Patricia was in the waiting room down the hall, ready to call the police if things went sideways. Richard was with hospital security, prepared to lock down the floor if necessary. And Ethan, against his protests, was moved to a different floor entirely, somewhere safe where Julian couldn't use him as leverage. I was sitting in my original chair beside Ethan's now empty bed when Julian knocked on the door at exactly 2 p.m. "Come in," I called, my voice steady. My brother walked in looking tired and stressed, his expensive suit slightly rumpled, his eyes darting around the room like he expected an ambush. When he saw that we were alone, he relaxed slightly. "Where's Ethan?" "I sent him down for more tests," I said. "I wanted to talk to you privately." Julian sat in the chair across from me, and for just a moment I saw my little brother again, the kid who'd cried at our father's funeral, the teenager who'd been so lost after our mother died, the man I'd protected and defended for 32 years. Then I remembered what he'd done to my son, what he'd been planning to do to me, and the sympathy vanished. "So," he said, "you wanted to talk." "I wanted to apologize," I said, and I watched his eyebrows rise in surprise. "I've been thinking about what happened with Ethan, and you're right, I overreacted. He shouldn't have been snooping around your office in the middle of the night. He shouldn't have gotten involved in your business. I'm sorry I didn't discipline him better." Julian studied my face, trying to determine if I was sincere. "That's big of you to admit." "I'm tired, Julian," I continued, letting exhaustion creep into my voice. "I'm tired of fighting, tired of being the responsible one, tired of carrying the weight of this family. Ethan's going to Yale in a few months, and I've been thinking about what comes next for me. I might take a step back from the business, maybe travel, maybe finally relax for once in my life." I saw interest flicker in his eyes. "Travel sounds nice. Where were you thinking?" "I've always wanted to take a sailing trip," I said casually. "Maybe rent a yacht, sail down to the Caribbean, really disconnect for a while. My friend Laura has a place in St. Croix." "Sailing," Julian repeated, and I saw his mind working. A sailing accident would be perfect for his purposes, easy to make it look like a drowning, like equipment failure, like natural causes. "That sounds great, Christine. You should definitely do that." "Maybe you could come with me," I suggested, watching him carefully. "We could repair our relationship, spend some quality time together. Lord knows we haven't since we were kids." He smiled, and it was like watching a mask slide over his face. "I'd love that. When were you thinking?" "Soon," I said. "Maybe next month? I can have my assistant start making arrangements." That's when the door opened, and Vincent Russo walked in. He was exactly as Ethan had described, tall, well-dressed, around 50, with the kind of face that looked friendly until you looked at his eyes. "I hope I'm not interrupting," Russo said pleasantly, "but I thought this might be a good time for all of us to have a conversation." Julian's face went white. "What are you doing here? How did you—" "Mrs. Hartwell invited me," Russo finished, closing the door behind him. "Sit down, Julian. We have a lot to discuss." My brother looked between us, panic starting to show in his eyes. "Christine, what is this?" "This is the conversation we should have had weeks ago," I said calmly, "before you beat my son, before you forged my signature, before you decided that killing me was easier than fixing your mistakes." Julian stood up abruptly. "I don't know what you think you know, but—" "Sit down," Russo said, and this time his voice had an edge that made Julian freeze. "Your sister and I have come to an understanding. You're going to want to hear this." Julian sat, and I could see sweat starting to form on his forehead. Mr. Russo here has been very forthcoming about your business arrangement, I said, pulling out a folder from the bag at my feet. $8 million in debt, plus interest that's been accumulating for 18 months. Properties sold at a loss, investors defrauded, and a desperate plan to collect on my life insurance policy to make it all go away. That's insane, Julian said, but his voice cracked. Christine, you can't believe— I have recordings, I interrupted. Ethan heard everything that night. He heard Vincent tell you to make sure the policy paid out soon. He heard you promise that my death would look like an accident. That's why you beat him, Julian. Not because he interrupted a business meeting, but because he became a witness to conspiracy to commit murder. The color drained from Julian's face completely. He's lying. He misheard. I'm wearing a wire right now, I said, touching the small device hidden under my blouse. Everything you say is being recorded and transmitted to 3 different locations. The FBI is listening, the state police are listening, and my lawyers are listening. So I'd suggest you think very carefully about what you say next. Russo leaned back in his chair, looking almost amused. Your sister made me a very interesting offer, Julian. She said if I cooperated with the authorities, if I testified about your plan to kill her, I might avoid the worst charges. Murder for hire, conspiracy to commit murder, those carry the needle in Connecticut. But financial crimes, racketeering, I might do 5 years, maybe less with good behavior. Julian's hands were shaking now. You can't do this. Vincent, we had a deal. We had a deal where you were going to pay me back, Russo corrected. But you're broke, Julian. You've got nothing left except that insurance policy, and that only pays out if your sister dies. Now, I'm a businessman, and I don't like losing money, but I like spending the rest of my life in prison even less. So when Mrs. Hartwell offered me a way out, I took it. You're testifying against me? Julian's voice was barely a whisper. You're going to send me to prison? You were going to kill your own sister, Russo said, shaking his head. I've done a lot of bad things in my life, Julian, but I've never crossed that line. Family is family. The fact that you were willing to, well, that tells me everything I need to know about your character. I pulled out another set of documents. These are the forgery charges. You mortgaged the Riverside estate using my forged signature. That's a Class B felony in Connecticut, punishable by 1 to 20 years in prison. Then there's the Ponzi scheme, $12 million stolen from 40 investors, including several of our father's oldest friends. That's wire fraud, securities fraud, theft by deception. Mitchell Tang has documented every transaction. Julian's eyes were wild now, darting around the room like he was looking for an escape. This is entrapment. You can't— It's not entrapment when you actually committed the crimes, Mr. Richard Connolly said, walking into the room with 2 uniformed state troopers and a woman in a dark suit. Mr. Julian Hartwell, I'm Detective Sarah Morrison with the Connecticut State Police Financial Crimes Unit. You're under arrest for forgery, wire fraud, securities fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit murder. The troopers moved forward, pulling out handcuffs, and Julian finally broke. Christine, please! I'm your brother! You can't do this to me! I stood up, walking over to where the officers were restraining him. You broke my son's face. You stole from our family. You planned to murder me and make it look like an accident. And you did it all because you were too proud to ask for help, too greedy to live within your means, too cowardly to face the consequences of your choices. Tears were streaming down Julian's face now. I'm sorry. I was desperate. The debts were piling up and I didn't know what else to do. You could have come to me, I said quietly. You could have told me the truth. I would have helped you, Julian. I would have found a way to fix it. But instead, you chose to hurt the people who loved you most. Detective Morrison read him his rights while the troopers cuffed his hands behind his back. Vincent Russo stood up, straightening his suit. Detective, I'm ready to give my statement whenever you are. We'll transport Mr. Hartwell first, then we'll need you to come down to the station, Morrison said. She turned to me. Mrs. Hartwell, we'll need your full statement as well, and your son's testimony when he's recovered enough to give it. Whatever you need, I said. I want to make sure every charge sticks. As they led Julian toward the door, he looked back at me one last time. I hope you're happy, Christine. You've destroyed your only brother. No, I said firmly. You destroyed yourself. I'm just making sure you face the consequences. After they left, I sat down heavily, feeling the adrenaline finally start to drain from my system. Patricia came in from the hallway, followed by Mitchell, both of them looking relieved that the confrontation was over. That was the gutsiest thing I've ever seen, Patricia said. You had him and Russo in the same room, wearing a wire, getting them to implicate themselves. Christine, you just handed the prosecutors a gift-wrapped case. What happens now? I asked Richard, who was organizing his documents back into his briefcase. Now we wait for the legal system to do its job, he said. Julian will be arraigned tomorrow. Based on the evidence we have, I expect he'll be denied bail. Flight risk, danger to others. The trial will probably be 6 to 8 months out, but with Russo's testimony and all the financial documentation, the prosecution's case is airtight. And the trust? The clause I told you about activates as soon as Julian's convicted of any felony related to the trust assets. The forgery alone will trigger it. Everything he owns will transfer to you, the Riverside estate, his remaining assets, his share of the family business. You'll have full control of your father's legacy. I thought about that for a moment. I want to sell the Riverside estate. I never want to set foot in that house again, not after what Julian did there to Ethan. Whatever money we get from the sale, I want it split among the investors Julian defrauded. They trusted our family name, and Julian destroyed that trust. The least I can do is try to make them whole. Mitchell nodded approvingly. $12 million in damages, and the estate should sell for close to $6 million in the current market. It won't cover everything, but it'll help. Then we'll liquidate other assets until we can cover the full amount, I said. I don't want a single person to lose money because of my brother's crimes, whatever it takes. The next few hours were a blur of police statements and legal procedures. Ethan was brought back to the room, and I held him while he gave his testimony to Detective Morrison, watching my brave son relive the trauma of that night so that justice could be served. When the detective finally left, Ethan looked at me with something like awe. Mom, you took down Uncle Julian and a loan shark in the same afternoon. That was incredible. That was necessary, I corrected, brushing his hair back from his forehead the way I used to when he was little. Your uncle made his choices, and now he has to live with them. But you need to understand something, Ethan. This wasn't about revenge. This was about stopping him before he hurt anyone else, about protecting our family and making sure the people he victimized got justice. It felt like revenge, Ethan said. When they put those handcuffs on him, when he was crying and begging, it felt good. I know, I admitted. But that feeling doesn't last. What lasts is knowing we did the right thing, that we used the system the way it's supposed to work, that we didn't lower ourselves to his level. Your uncle chose violence and deception. We chose truth and consequences. Over the next weeks, the story exploded across Connecticut. The Hartwell family scandal was front-page news, a wealthy real estate heir running a Ponzi scheme, planning to murder his own sister for insurance money, beating his nephew to cover up his crimes. The society pages that had once celebrated our family now dissected every detail of Julian's fall from grace. The investors Julian had defrauded started coming forward, and I met with each of them personally to apologize and promise restitution. Some were angry, demanding immediate payment. Others were more understanding, grateful that I was taking responsibility for my brother's actions. Mrs. Eleanor Fitzpatrick, who'd been friends with my mother and had lost nearly $500,000 to Julian's scheme, held my hands across her kitchen table and said, "Christine, you're nothing like your brother. Your parents would be so proud of the woman you've become." Those words meant more to me than anything. Julian's arraignment was exactly as Richard predicted. Bail denied, trial date set for 8 months out. I didn't attend. I couldn't bear to see my brother in an orange jumpsuit, couldn't handle hearing him plead not guilty to crimes we both knew he'd committed. Instead, I focused on rebuilding. The Riverside estate sold in just 3 weeks to a tech entrepreneur from California who didn't know or care about the scandal attached to it. $6.2 million, which went straight into the victim's restitution fund. I liquidated 2 commercial properties in downtown Greenwich, adding another $4 million. Mitchell worked with a bankruptcy attorney to create a fair distribution plan, making sure every investor got back at least 70 cents on the dollar, with promises of full restitution as more assets were liquidated. Ethan's recovery was slower than his physical healing. The surgery had been successful, and Dr. Patel said his vision would be fine, but the emotional trauma of being beaten by his uncle, of learning that his family member had planned to murder his mother, that took therapy, time, and patience. We started going to sessions together, mother and son, working through the betrayal and the grief. "I keep thinking I should have seen it coming," Ethan said one afternoon in Dr. Richardson's office. "Uncle Julian was always a little irresponsible, always living beyond his means. Why didn't I realize he was capable of something like this?" "Because you loved him," I said gently. "Because you wanted to see the best in him. That's not a weakness, Ethan. That's what makes you a good person. Your uncle's actions don't reflect on you. They reflect on him." Dr. Richardson nodded. "Christine's right. We can't predict when someone we love will betray us. All we can do is learn from it, set better boundaries, and keep our hearts open to the people who deserve our trust." 3 months after Julian's arrest, Vincent Russo's plea deal was finalized. He testified in front of a grand jury, detailing every aspect of Julian's plan to kill me. The discussions about making it look like a sailing accident, the timeline they'd created, the payoff structure once the insurance money came through. In exchange, Russo pleaded guilty to racketeering and illegal lending practices. He got 7 years in federal prison, eligible for parole in 5. Julian's trial was scheduled to begin in another 5 months, but 3 weeks before jury selection was supposed to start, Richard called with news. "He's taking a plea deal," Richard said. 25 years, no possibility of parole before 20. It's a good deal for him, considering he was looking at life without parole if a jury convicted him on all counts. "Did he allocate?" I asked, using the legal term for admitting guilt. "Full allocation. He stood in front of the judge and admitted to everything. The forgery, the Ponzi scheme, the assault on Ethan, the conspiracy to commit your murder. It's on the record now, Christine. He can't take it back." I felt a weight lift off my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. No trial meant Ethan wouldn't have to testify, wouldn't have to relive that night in front of a courtroom full of strangers. It meant we could finally start to move forward. The sentencing hearing was 2 weeks later, and this time I attended. I sat in the front row of the courtroom with Ethan beside me, watching as Julian was brought in wearing a suit his lawyer had provided. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. The man who'd once commanded every room he entered now shuffled to the defendant's table with his eyes down. Judge Patricia Thornton was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, known for her tough sentences in white-collar crime cases. She reviewed the plea agreement carefully before looking up at Julian. "Mr. Hartwell, you've pleaded guilty to 11 separate felonies. Before I accept this plea and impose sentence, I'm going to ask if you have anything you'd like to say." Julian stood, his lawyer rising with him. For a long moment, he said nothing, and I thought maybe he'd changed his mind. Then he turned and looked directly at me. "Christine, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't mean anything now. I know I can't undo what I've done, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. You were right. I could have come to you for help. I should have. Instead, I let my pride and my desperation turn me into someone I don't even recognize. I hurt your son. I planned to hurt you. I destroyed people's lives because I was too much of a coward to face my own failures. His voice broke. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect Ethan to forgive me. I just want you to know that every day for the rest of my life, I'm going to have to live with what I've done, and that's a punishment worse than any prison sentence. Judge Thornton let the silence hang for a moment before speaking. Mr. Hartwell, remorse is important, but it doesn't erase the harm you've caused. You didn't just commit financial crimes, you turned on your own family with violence and treachery. You beat an 18-year-old boy and planned the murder of your own sister. This court finds your actions to be among the most egregious betrayals of trust I've seen in 30 years on the bench. She picked up her gavel. I hereby sentence you to 25 years in the Connecticut Department of Correction with no possibility of parole before 20 years served. You'll be required to pay full restitution to all victims of your fraud, though I understand your sister has already undertaken that responsibility. This court also recommends you be placed in protective custody, as your crimes may make you a target in general population. The gavel came down. This court is adjourned. As the guards moved to escort Julian out of the courtroom, he looked at me one more time. I didn't look away, didn't cry, didn't show him anything except the strength I'd found through this nightmare. He'd tried to break me, tried to make me a victim, but instead he'd reminded me just how powerful I could be when I fought for the people I loved. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, but I walked past them all with my head high and my arm around my son. We'd won. Not in the vengeful, destructive way Julian had operated, but in the way that mattered, with truth, with justice, with the system working exactly as it should. That evening, Ethan and I sat on the balcony of our home in Greenwich, watching the sun set over Long Island Sound. He was heading to Yale in 2 weeks, starting the life Julian had tried to destroy. "Mom," he said quietly,
"What Uncle Julian said in court? Do you think he meant it? Do you think he's really sorry?" I thought about that carefully before answering. I think he's sorry he got caught. I think he's sorry he's going to prison. Whether he's truly sorry for the pain he caused us, I don't know, and honestly, it doesn't matter. His apology doesn't change what he did. It doesn't erase your injuries or the fear we both felt. It doesn't give back the money he stole or the trust he destroyed. So we just move on? We move forward, I corrected. There's a difference. Moving on implies forgetting, leaving it behind. Moving forward means we take the lessons we learned, we honor the strength we discovered, and we build something better with the pieces he left behind. Ethan nodded slowly. I've been thinking about my major at Yale. I was going to do business, like Uncle Julian, like you, but now I'm thinking maybe law. Maybe I want to be the kind of attorney who goes after people like him, who protect people from fraud and schemes. I felt my eyes well up with tears, but they were good tears, proud tears. Your grandfather would have loved that. He always said the law was about protecting the vulnerable from the powerful. If that's what you want to do, I'll support you 100%. What about you? Ethan asked. What are you going to do now? I looked out at the water, thinking about the empire I'd built, the family I'd protected, the justice I'd fought for. I'm going to keep running Hartwell Properties. I'm going to rebuild our family's reputation, one ethical business deal at a time. I'm going to make sure every investor your uncle defrauded gets every penny back, even if it takes years. And I'm going to be here for you, supporting you, believing in you, showing you what real family loyalty looks like. 6 months later, the last of Julian's victims received their final restitution checks. I'd liquidated nearly everything my brother had owned, and a good portion of my own assets to make sure everyone was made whole. The Hartwell name, which had been dragged through the mud, was slowly starting to recover. People remembered that I'd done the right thing, that I'd turned my own brother over to the authorities, that I'd prioritized justice over family loyalty. The business community respected that. New clients started calling, old friends reached out, and gradually the scandal began to fade into the past. Ethan thrived at Yale. He joined the pre-law society, volunteered with the legal aid clinic, and found his purpose in fighting for people who couldn't fight for themselves. Every time he called home, I could hear the confidence returning to his voice, could feel him becoming the man he was always meant to be. As for me, I learned that strength isn't about never being afraid, it's about being terrified and doing what needs to be done anyway. I learned that family isn't just blood, it's the people who show up for you, who fight for you, who refuse to let you face your battles alone. And I learned that sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply refusing to let the person who hurt you win. It's standing up, brushing yourself off, and building something better from the ruins they left behind. Julian tried to destroy me to save himself. Instead, he gave me the chance to show my son what real courage looks like. He tried to take everything from us, but in the end, he only succeeded in making us stronger. And that, I thought as I sat in my office overlooking Greenwich Harbor, was the best revenge of all. The moral was simple, clear, and powerful. No amount of money, no family name, no charm or manipulation can protect you from the consequences of your choices. When you betray the people who love you, when you hurt the innocent to cover your own mistakes, when you choose greed over integrity, you don't just lose everything material, you lose the only things that truly matter: trust, love, and respect. Justice might be slow, but it's inevitable, and in the end, the truth always wins. Quick question before you leave: where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments below. Thank you for being part of this story time with me. I'll see you all again in the next video. Until then, stay strong, stay blessed, and keep shining.